DeMarcus Cousins has had some of the worst injury luck in recent NBA history. First, he ruptures his Achilles tendon, which can often be career-ending for athletes, and then just after he comes back, he injures his quadriceps. Now, before even starting the new season, we found out today that he's torn his ACL, all on that same side where he had his previous injuries. Welcome back, everybody. For those new, my name's Brian, and I'm a doctor and a sports fan, and it's my goal on this channel to combine those interests to help explain different sports injuries and sports medicine topics in a way that you all can better learn from and understand. Today, we're going to be taking a look at DeMarcus Cousins' ACL tear, and specifically, we're going to focus on this idea of what we call the kinetic chain. A lot of people are wondering if all of these injuries that have happened to his left leg could be related, and we'll address that in today's video. We'll focus on some of the specifics about how all the muscles in the lower leg are working together to try to prevent injuries like this from happening, and why you can be more susceptible to these injuries if you're not optimally recovered and rehabbed. Make sure you guys go subscribe if you like this type of content and want to stay up to date with future videos, and let's get started. As you guys know, Cousins has had two recent injuries to that left leg. He first had his Achilles tendon rupture, and then after he came back from that, he suffered an injury to his quadriceps. In this type of situation, we definitely have to consider the relationship because of how all these injuries have been on that same side of the body. When we talk about the kinetic chain, we're referring to this idea that the different joints and structures in the body are all linked together like a chain. It's almost an engineering type concept where whatever's going on in one part of this sequence affects everything else. If a pitcher's throwing a baseball, whatever they're doing with their lower body ultimately affects what's going on at their hand whenever they release the baseball. Similarly, in a basketball player like Cousins, we know that whatever's going on in the hips, in the ankles, in the knee, are all related to one another. If someone has an issue with their ankle or an issue with their hip, they're more predisposed to something going wrong and being different at the knee and vice versa. We've all heard that a chain is only as strong as the weakest link, and so if any of the links in this kinetic chain are weak, are injured, or improperly rehabbed, you make the entire rest of the chain susceptible to damage. Your ACL is trying to provide stability in the knee joint to prevent the tibia and the femur from moving in a forward and backwards plane on one another. But thankfully, our bodies are designed to provide additional support to our knee, and it gets this by the different muscles. The quadriceps sits on the front side of the leg, and when it contracts, it's helping to prevent the tibia from moving backwards. So if you pull on the front of the tibia with the quadriceps, it's going to try to pull that forward and keep it nice and stable. So if the quadriceps contracts too hard, it's pulling against the function of the ACL. On the back side of the leg, the hamstring is working in the opposite direction. When your hamstring contracts, it's pulling the tibia backwards in relation to the femur. And so this is trying to help provide support for the ACL. You've got both the hamstring and the ACL trying to prevent that tibia from sliding forward in relation to the femur. This balance in the knee is super critical whenever we talk about rehab and preventing things like ACL injuries. Our knee can't rely on the ACL and the PCL alone to provide that stability, and it needs the muscles working as well to provide that additional support. We know from literature that deficiencies in this quadriceps and in the hamstring make you more susceptible to these ligament injuries in the knee. Going back to Cousins' quad injury, it's really important when you rehab something like this that you balance the muscles. You've got a quad injury, so of course you're gonna focus on strengthening and rehabbing the quad, but you can't forget about the hamstring to balance the knee. If your quadriceps muscle becomes too strong and you don't train the hamstring properly, then you've overpowered this balance in the knee and you put those ligaments at more risk of getting hurt. Similarly, when someone's rehabbing a hamstring injury, you've got to make sure that you balance the muscle in the front with the quadriceps. Let's get back to this idea of the kinetic chain and demonstrate some of the key motions that are involved with an ACL injury and why this kinetic chain is really important to train. The most common mechanism of a non-contact ACL injury like Cousins sustained is whenever the knee goes into a dynamic valgus position. It's excessively loaded under flexion and then collapses inward when the ACL is most susceptible. So we train this whole kinetic chain to have good stability and strength in that knee and in that lower leg so that we don't have this dynamic knee movement whenever we jump and land. But it doesn't always come from the knee itself. If we look up at the hips, if you have really weak hip muscles, that causes your knee to be more susceptible to bending inwards. Similarly, if you have poor proprioception, poor strength at the ankle, you equally subject that knee to that valgus load capability. So it's important as players are going through this rehab to train this entire kinetic chain and not have any deficiencies in this whole sequence. And it's not just strength of the muscles that's important here. You have to have good neuromuscular control, meaning those muscles have to know how to fire and work in coordination to ultimately protect your joints. That's why a lot of ACL prevention programs do a lot of dynamic movement and activities to try to train this movement pattern within that kinetic chain so that you don't have these deficiencies that lead to an injury. Certainly there's always going to be injuries that no matter what you do, you can't prevent and it's just bad luck. But when we see this many recurrent injuries on the same limb, we have to start wondering about these principles of the kinetic chain, wondering if there's any sort of deficiencies that predispose someone to getting hurt. Whenever people complain about their favorite athletes not returning from injury, this is why it takes so long, because you've got to ensure that you've got proper function in that entire limb and in the rest of the body even, to not predispose to different injuries. That's it though for this video, guys. I hope you learned something about this idea of the kinetic chain and why it's important to have good muscle balance and control with the ACL. Leave any comments, questions you have below, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.